Hello everyone, I'm Marian Guevara and today I'm going to be sharing with you my 5 favorite books of 2022. I've decided to do 5 favorite books because I've only read 22 books this past year, much less than I've done in previous years. So because it's not as much, I wanted to do 5 just to make it a bit harder for myself. And I'll do it in chronological order from when I read it in the year. So yeah, I won't do this like a top 5 or anything because that would be just too difficult for me. So yeah. So the first book I am to talk about is The Storm of Echoes by Christel Dabos. This is the 4th and final book in the Mirror Visitor Quartet. This is a translated work of fiction. This is from the original French. And I really enjoyed this book. It's highly polarizing. I know the 4th book, I think, can make or break the series for a lot of people, and it has already, because this one has some pretty polarizing views or reviews on Goodreads. It's like a 3.7 last time I checked. The major overarching plot that has been sort of established from the first book and that has been slowly and steadily, building up throughout, the subsequent editions of the series, comes to a head in this 4th and final book, and it's a lot. One of the criticisms that a lot of people have about this book is that it throws a lot at you. However, I think Dabos does a good job of sort of having it explained to you as things are revealed. It's not as if she dumps all these big revelations and you're kind of at a loss for words and you have to figure it out by yourself or on your own. And as I've mentioned before, this book really delves into the philosophical. It's amazing how in the first book we're kind of introduced to sort of this typical YA court intrigue plot, and how it kind of just evolves over the book 2, book 3, and book 4 to the 4th book, where there's a huge chunk that deals with discussing the I, a sense of identity, the power and the sense of identity. I also really love seeing how the relationship of Ophelia and Thorne has progressed. How in the first book things were very bristly and very harsh between them, and rightly so, considering they were strangers that are kind of thrust together. But seeing them now sort of on the same page and working together, and just seeing this slow burn romance kind of arrive where they're at in this book is just so satisfying and very believable. There are a lot of risks, and you feel that none of the characters are safe. And like I said, it doesn't end traditionally, but I feel like it ends true to the type of story that Dabos was creating. It's a very rich world, one that I do agree I would like to see explored more. But yeah, this was heartbreaking to say the least, but satisfying. The next book is Tender as the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now this and The Great Gatsby are basically tied for my favorite Fitzgerald. I'm not entirely sure which one is my favorite, but Tender as the Night I feel like is very slept on. And for those who don't know, Tender as the Night follows this couple, Dick and Nicole Diver, on the French Riviera. And the cracks in their marriage are slowly being revealed when we have the arrival of a Hollywood starlet, Rosemary, who kind of joins the scene. Now, that's the basic premise for this book. However, honestly, this is an examination of the character Dick Diver. And I described it in a previous video. We're basically watching this man slowly fall into oblivion. I feel like the best comparison that I can make is imagine a detailed pencil sketch of a man, and then taking an eraser and then slowly erasing it so you lose some of the detail. Then you keep on erasing it until all you see is an outline, and then you keep on erasing it until there's nothing. In the beginning of the book, we see Dick through Rosemary's eyes, and he appears to us and to her this sort of charismatic, sort of mysterious, well-rounded man. But as the book continues and we follow Dick, we begin to see just how empty he is. And we see his relationship with his wife and with his friends sort of crumbling down. And then by the end of the book, like I said, Dick Diver, slowly becomes incomprehensible. Like there's nothing left of him anymore. And what I really liked was that you get a sense of this sober maturity in his writing, especially when you compare it to his earlier works, like his short stories of The Great Gatsby. You kind of understand, or you get this feeling that this is being written by someone who has had a lot of years on his shoulders now. Although we are often told not to see characters as just complete stand-ins for authors, I can't help but feel that Fitzgerald put a lot of what he was feeling into this work, to a point where it can feel autobiographical, especially when you look into his past, into his own life, and the period in which he was writing this book. So yeah, this is just a beautifully, well written. I do admit, it can be a bit confusing at times, but it's still beautifully well written and well realized novel. Well realized sort of character examination. Following that, we have Beloved by Toni Morrison. Now, I've read from Toni Morrison before. I've read Sula and The Bluest Eye, and I've always enjoyed her prose. Her and Fitzgerald have some of my favorite prose when it comes to American authors. So yeah, Beloved, I believe, is her most well-known work. This won the 1988 Pulitzer Prize for fiction, in fact. And I will have to say that out of the three that I've read from her, including this is my favorite of hers. Beloved takes place a decade or so after the end of slavery, after the Civil War, and we're following a woman named Sethi, who, although she was previously a slave and now she's freed, she is still haunted by slavery. And we are following different perspectives, hers, her mother-in-law's, a man she knew at the plantation she ran away from. I know there are some people who aren't fans of the structure of the way this story is told. It's not linear, and as I mentioned, we are shifting from one perspective to another. A story or the narrative could be in the present, but then we suddenly switch to the past. But honestly, I feel that it really adds or emphasizes the themes of this book. There are a lot of elements here, a lot of unanswered questions that I believe give an enriching analysis, especially after your first read. For instance, the character of Beloved, is she a real person or is she a metaphor? There are many things that we don't know. Did Sethi's husband Hallie, did he ever escape slavery? What happened to Hallie's two boys when they left? We know they left in the beginning of the book, but we never know what are their fates. So you have a bunch of familial ties that are forever broken. You're left with all this trauma, and you're kind of seeing how these characters are going to work through it, how they can possibly work through it. What Beloved does, and what Toni Morrison has done through Beloved, is provide a more personal look into slavery and sort of showing the extent of the trauma and the horror that something as dehumanizing as slavery can do to the human spirit. So the fourth book is The Violent Buried Away by Flannery O'Connor. O'Connor is one of my favorite authors of all time, so naturally should end up on this list. So The Violent Buried Away is her second and last novel. We are following a young man named Francis Tarwater, who upon his great uncle's death is sort of left at a crossroads. He doesn't know whether or not he's going to sort of fulfill the prophecy that his uncle laid out, that he's going to be a prophet, or if he's going to sort of join the secular world along with an uncle of his. I honestly find The Violent Buried Away to be a more difficult book to analyze compared to Beloved. I think I really need to devote an entire video to The Violent Buried Away, or even just take a literature class to help me better understand The Violent Buried Away. For such a short book, it's so packed. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that O'Connor, what she loved to do, and I think she mentioned it in an interview once, that a writer writes only to reveal a mystery. You see the events that unfold on a superficial level, at a first glance level, but you get this feeling that there's just something at work, something else much deeper at work. You may not fully grasp what it is, but it's there. She takes a setting, like the southern United States, and she, through her writing, is able to turn it into something mystical. It takes such skill to sort of invoke like this deep sort of spiritual feeling, while on the surface level you're portraying sort of like these violent acts and these grotesque characters. I definitely think that it's an improvement over Wise Blood, and it's definitely one I would like to reread in the future. Now we have the fifth and final book in this favorite books of 2022. This is related to the book that I just showed you, and that is The Habit of Being, The Letters of Flannery O'Connor. This are all of, not all, but selected letters of O'Connor's to various, publishers and friends, compiled by one of her good old friends, Sally Fitzgerald. As you can tell, this is a chunky book, and I tabbed this to no end. I didn't used to be a tabber when it comes to my books, but ever since I started reading Flannery O'Connor, I have been tabbing. And I've color-coded tabbed. I not just tabbed, I color-coded. So you'll see pink, purple, blue, and green. So the pink stands for references to, let's say, other famous individuals, other famous works. So if she mentions Kafka or Waugh, Gene Kelly, I'd put a pink tab. The green is all the moments she made me laugh. Then purple is when she discusses literature, maybe when she's giving advice for writing. That's the purple. And then blue is her theological, not advice, but her theological thoughts, which were my favorite part of this book. Now, if you're a fan of Flannery O'Connor, if you've read her works and you have not read any of her letters, I highly recommend that you do so. While, of course, the entirety of the person of Flannery O'Connor will forever be a mystery to us, I feel like the letters give a really good glimpse into her person, and you see all the wit, the self-deprecating humor, all the stances she held. And I think on a personal note, why this struck with me or resonated with me a lot, Flannery O'Connor was a Catholic and I'm a Catholic. And so a lot of her theological takes were just fascinating and entirely enjoyable to read. She wasn't, sentimental. She didn't want to, she sort of warned against the trap of high emotion, mistaking sort of emotion for faith and all of that. She was also great friends with people who weren't Catholic, who weren't religious. She can find friendship and kinship with other people who weren't part of her way of life, but still retain that sense, of being true to herself. And, alongside the theological takes, her takes or her advice on literature, she does, go, in depth into some of her stories, explaining, the meaning behind this sort of thing and, this certain thing, this certain element, this type of character. And it was just a joy to sort of peek into her mindset and her thought process. And on top of that, she was hilarious. She was witty. She had this dry humor. And I mentioned, she was self-deprecating as well, often downplaying her intelligence and her skill. But, it's done in a way where she's still being honest. It was just a treat. It was just a joy to read, her letters and kind of get a better understanding of this woman, who she was and what she believed in and what she stood for. So yeah, these are my 5 favorite books of 2022. Thank you for sticking around and listening to me, ramble about each of them. Let me know down in the comments, what was your favorite read of 2022 or favorite reads? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!